I do agree
Okay.
with it.
So you agree with this guy, and he's a not so
That
wise philosopher.
my philosopher, yes.
Okay, so you agree with him. Okay. Okay, in the chat we have every business should have a business plan, but not all businesses start with the actual plan. Aha. So this one disagrees.
I actually like his response better though.
Huh?
I actually like his statement better.
Really?
Yeah, it should have, but not everybody has it.
Should have, but not everybody have it. Any other responses? So we have one agree and one disagree. Remember, he's a not so wise philosopher, so this one said they agree. So we have two people agree. Agree. Remember, he's a not so wise philosopher, so be careful of agreeing with him. You have two agrees and, well, it's sort of a trick question in a way, because remember, I did not state the quality of the plan. I did not state whether or not the plan was written or not. I believe every business has a business plan, but for the most part, it's up in the head, so to speak. Because whenever I'm working with a client, I'm amazed. And I've been doing this for over 20 years. And I'm amazed when I speak with a client and they tell me there's some point during the session where I just open it up to the client and say, tell me what you want to do. And I'm very much amazed and surprised, pleasantly surprised at how they can articulate what they want to do or what they have been doing and probably want to expand on it. So I believe every business has a business plan, but it's up here. So the purpose of this seminar is to get it in writing, because sometimes I tell a client, you know what you just told me for the last 15 to 20 minutes? All you need to do is put it on paper and you'll have a master business plan. And many times at that point, the face dropped. 15 minutes, they're able to tell me everything they want to do, but then putting it in writing seems to be the challenge. And I could understand why in several instances. So, but this is what the business plan is. It's your business dreams on paper. Have to be on paper. When you're applying for any type of financing, whether it's through a bank or through an investor or through an industry lender, they want to see it on paper. Why? Because you could speak to them about it, but if it's on paper, it's to their advantage, because they could review it again and again and again. They could share it with people. If you just verbalize it, yes, they can tape you and, but it's a little more challenging if it's only in your head or you could only verbalize it. So putting it on paper is the key. Okay, so it has to be objective, critical, and unemotional. And it can be a reality check, because if you're preparing an effective business plan, if you're going through the proper steps, sometimes, and this has actually happened to some of my clients, they've actually decided not to pursue the business based on the preparation of the business plan. And going through the process of preparing a business plan, they said, no. Like this one client that really comes to mind, when she reached the section on competition, where you have to compare yourself with what's already out there, she decided that she's not too strong. She can't compete with her competition, and she decided not to launch the business or to go for the loan. She was already in business. Okay? And what I like to tell people is it's similar to preparing a plan to build a structure. I'm sure all of us have been involved in some degree to the building of a structure, whether it's a home or whatever structure it is. And if you've ever been involved in that process, think of how you had to go to the architect and they had to sit down with the architect and try to devise a plan, how many rooms, the spacing, and all of this stuff. Is similar to a business plan. And it could be similar in terms of the length of preparation. When I tell that to people, they kind of think and say, I mean, this thing will take a while, okay? Because It does. It does usually take a while. And the purpose for the business plan, the most popular purpose is to seek financing from investors and banks, etc. Believe it or not, you could also solicit partners. You want somebody to partner with you because they have something that you want. You might have the idea, but they have the financing, or they have the connection, or whatever they have. They have the administrative ability. So you might want to seek them to be a partner in the business. They're going to want to see a business plan as well. It's easier for them. Landlords, when Crown Bay, I'm old enough to remember when Crown Bay Center was first being built. The landlords, they wanted all of the tenants or the potential tenants to have not a full business plan. They just really wanted the financial projection. So we were able to get a lot of clients through that process. And also it provides a sense of direction. I'm sure we've all heard of this statement: if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. The types of business plans: standard, startup, internal. Personally, I just prepare one plan, whether it's for startup or internal or whatever. I just use the same template. I will get into templates in a little bit. But remember now, we want to prepare an effective business plan. So for it to be effective, these are the 4 elements it needs to have. Sufficient demand, needs to have adequate supply, effective management, and the business has to make sense. And you notice that we spell sense with a $sign. So I think you know what time that is. And these are the same elements that makes a business successful. And we're going to go through these elements. Sufficient demand, it has to be enough demand to generate a positive cash flow. Notice I didn't say profit. There's a difference between profit and cash flow. If you're interested in this, is something we can discuss later. But there is a difference between cash flow and profit. In the ideal world, they'll be equal, but there are some differences. You should be able to measure the demand. How do you measure it? And you should monitor it because it changes. Sometimes it changes because of what's happening around us. For example, think about the COVID situation and think about the mask. Before COVID, how many people used to buy and wear masks? Probably little, but then I know family members who actually started businesses selling masks. And so because of the fact that they saw the demand for masks, they decided to do that. And I think they were pretty successful. And there has to be sufficient demand for both the products and services of the business and for the business itself. For example, let's say cell phones. I think cell phones are wildly popular and there's a huge demand for cell phones, but there might not be a demand for cell phone or the service from your business. You see, so you could put in a business plan that there's a demand for cell phones, but you have to prove that there would be, or there's not already a demand for cell phone service or the cell phones itself from your business. And many times you have to create the demand because it's not there. And of course, that can be very time consuming and could be very expensive. And usually you have to create demand when the business is new, or it might be new to the market. For example, it might be wildly popular in the States, but it's not popular in the US Virgin Islands. It hasn't reached us as yet. So because of that, you have to create the demand for these types of products and services. Or you might have an abundance of supply. You might have, the example I usually use is guinea grass. I know that guinea grass can be used for a lot of things, but let's say somebody found this, this new use for guinea grass. Somebody experimented and they found a new use for guinea grass, and you have a bunch of them in your yard. You have abundance of supply. So then you could, you might have to create, well, the demand is already created when the person discovered the new use, but then, you know, you have an abundance of supply, so it would help. Think of these industries like the entertainment industry. Think about the movies. When the movies comes out, there are a lot of people who follow movies or artists when it comes to music based on who the artist is. They might like the artist, but they might say, well, I want to at least sample. I want to see a little bit of the movie first. So that's why they have the trailers. That's creating the demand. So even though you like this particular actor or actress, the fact that you want to see the trailer or the trailers, because sometimes they have multiple variations of the trailer, to see if is it worth spending my money to go to see this? And technology, of course, because we know technology changes fast. Service industries, they also usually have to create demand. And health products as well. And health products because you have to, anytime you have to ingest something into your body, you have to really convince people that this is something they need to do. So that's why you need to create the demand for those particular industries. So how do you do it? How do you create demand? Well, of course, you have the traditional advertising. We have the infomercials. I don't see too many of them anymore. They used to be popular a few years ago, like late 90s, maybe early 2000s, because they used to be focused. They used to be for like 3-4 minutes or even more, sometimes 15 minutes. I think they're still around, but they're very late at night. You might see an infomercial. They're very focused. Seminars and presentations. When I was working at SBDC, I used to always encourage clients who I thought needed to create the demand for their business to utilize our training facility. You know, we would rent it for a price, and I tell them, hey, I think it was like $75 an hour at the time. Of course, it might be different now. Rent it for 2 hours. You know, you have a focused crowd, you have a captive audience. And that would be a good way to create the demand for your products. And of course, educational literature, written or online. There's some businesses that do this on a regular basis. Not promoting any business or anything like that, but if you read the Daily News, Mike's Paint Store, they do a very good job of this. If you look at their ads, they're educating us about the different types of paint and why you should use this paint or whatever. Of course, they're promoting their business as well, but a lot of it is educational if you look at their ads. And of course, you have to measure it, as we said. How do you measure it? You measure it with surveys, customer feedback, and product testing. So you measure demand to find out if there's a demand. And remember, all of this should be in your business plan. If you're doing all of this, if you're conducting surveys, the result of your survey needs to be in the business plan. And you have to say how you conducted the survey. You have to be objective with analyzing demand, because a lot of people take their own experience and figure that there's a demand. And there's a very good example of this. One of my clients, when I was working with SBDC, she was in the market to purchase some products that she's really into, and she couldn't find them on the island. And so she thought, based on that, that there's a huge demand for these products. And so I was warning her and questioning her. I said, this is your experience. You don't know how many other people are interested in these products. But she was very determined to go forward. We did prepare the business plan, and we did submit it to the bank. And the loan officer, the bank, said the same thing. She said, Edwards, I don't think there's enough demand for these products. The loan was approved. She opened the business, but unfortunately, just like what I and the loan officer was thinking, there wasn't sufficient demand, and she closed the business because there wasn't enough demand. Study trends, study what's happening around us in terms of demographics. I always mention to people, why did they start things like ESPN in Espanol, ESPN Deportes? A lot of these brands were established because people noticed the demographics. The Hispanic population was increasing. And of course, you know, a few years ago, the Hispanic population surpassed the Black or African-American population in the United States. It used to be that the African-American population was the second highest to the whites. But, you know, a couple of years ago, the Hispanic passed. So people noticed those changes, and they said, okay, so we're going to create brands and businesses to satisfy this new demand. Okay. So we spoke about demand. What about supply? You have to be able to supply the demand. Yes, we established that there's a demand. How do you supply that demand? You have to satisfy your demand in terms of all of these items, the quality, the timeliness. And you know, this is a big issue in the US Virgin Islands, since we have to ship a lot of things in, a lot of things have to be brought in by shipping, supply chain, the customer service, the price, all of these things have to meet the, have to be able to satisfy the customer, the delivery times. The ambience is a very important item because there's some manufacturers, believe it or not, even if you have the money, you cannot purchase their products unless they actually come and visit your location to make sure it has the proper ambience, because they think so highly of their products that you can't just sell it out of a trailer. It has to be in a certain ambience. And if they do not approve of the ambience of your location, they're not going to sell you the product, even if you have the money. My clients have experienced this as well. Effective management, another element that makes a business successful and also makes a business plan successful. Because, excuse me, when you become a business owner, you automatically become a manager, whether you're ready or not. And these are the principles of management. We have, think of SPLOC. You have staffing, you have planning, you have leading, organizing, and controlling. And if you need assistance with management, the SBDC is a very great resource to contact. And of course, you know, there's other resources, but the SBDC is a very important resource to contact to help you with the management of your business. And of course, the business has to make sense. And as we said before, we spell sense with a $sign. So I think you kind of know what that means. And basically, it makes sense if the startup cost can be reasonably obtained. Many years ago, again, when I was working with SBDC, I had a client, and this client was a young guy. Imagine that he was still attending Adelita Camp crying school. He came in to see me with his aunt, a young guy, probably in 7th or 8th grade. And he had this awesome idea. And I had to look across the table and say, wow, this guy had this awesome business idea. This business could probably make $1 billion a year. I didn't say million, billion, the one with a B, could make $1 billion a year. The only catch to it is that it probably would cost him about $500 million to start the business. And I don't know if there's any lender at the time who would have been able to lend $500 million to a 13-year-old. And believe it or not, he started the business, but of course on a much smaller scale. But he did start the business because he was very passionate about it. And he's a big grown-up man now. And of course, the business has to be able to generate a positive cash flow as opposed to a profit. As we said before, that's one of the questions you guys could ask me. What's the difference between cash flow, positive cash flow, and profit? But like I said, if you're interested, you let me know at the end. Okay, so the sections of the plan. Table of contents is very important to be able to navigate through the plan. I love the table of contents because when I'm reviewing a business plan, I don't necessarily read it from cover to cover. I like to jump. I like to start in one section and jump around. And if I have your table of contents, it's easier for me to do that. And of course, it has to be prepared last because you don't know what pages items are going to appear on. So it has to be prepared last, but it's important. Now, the executive summary. And of course, the title of these sections are going to vary, excuse me, are going to vary from template to template. There's a lot of different business plan templates, and each template is going to have a different heading for the sections. So I'm utilizing the template that I use. I'm utilizing that for these sections. So the executive summary, when I was being trained working at SBDC and I was being trained on how to prepare business plans, I was trained by somebody who used to work in a bank, right? This person needs to be on the other end, receiving business plans and helping to make decisions. This person was a loan officer in the bank. And so this person told me that the most important section of the business plan is the executive summary. Because he said what they do is in the bank, they receive your business plan. And of course, they might have a briefing with you. And then, as soon as you turn your back, they go through the executive summary. Because if it's prepared properly, it's going to include, if you're obviously, if it's a bank, you have to indicate how much you want. You have to indicate how much you're going to put up for collateral, how much you're going to put up for equity, and all of these good points. And it's going to have the basics of what you're doing. So in the bank, they consider this the most important. So that's something to consider. Usually it's limited to 1 page, but it usually should capture their attention. They use this term elevator speech. Like if you had a brief moment with somebody who was a decision maker who could really help your business, you should give them your executive summary, or you should be able to recite it to them. Okay, and that's the selling point. You really want to capture their attention with your executive summary. And in the template that I use, there's another section called the business plan. Again, it's kind of strange because the whole document is a business plan, but yet they have a section that's called the plan. Actually, they call it the plan. So it's kind of strange, but that's what in other templates, they might call it the overview. And it's very similar to the executive summary, but it has things such as the history of the business, the structure, your form of ownership, your location. It has a little bit more than the executive summary. Okay. Now, in my humble opinion, and I don't know how much my opinion matters, but in my opinion, this section is the most important. It's called customer, market, and industry analysis. In some templates, it might be broken up. You might have a section that just deals with customer, a section that just deals with market, and a section that just deals with the industry. But in the template I use, they have them combined in one section, but they have them subsection. Customer section is a subsection, and et cetera, et cetera. So to me, this is the most important. After I read the executive summary, I'm going to go straight to this section. Why? Because remember we said earlier that a business plan needs to show that there's a demand. I need to see how you calculated your demand, and it's going to be highlighted in this section. So I need to see that there's a demand for your products and services. And I'm going to go straight to this section after the executive summary. So because you should identify in this section also your target market, your competition. And if you've conducted any market research, the results of it should be in this section as well. I remember one time a client came to me again when I was working with SBDC, and she did conduct some market research. So I did commend her on that. Say, wow, you did your market research. But then I said, how many people did you survey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I come to realize that her sample size was very small. I think like maybe 20 or 30 people. It's a good start, but again, if you're going to include market research in your business plan, you have to state the particulars. We interviewed 200 people, or we surveyed 200 people. And as a result, and you might want to include a sample of the survey in your, as one of the attachments as well. And she basically just spoke with people who she knew. So I tell her, a survey, you really have to deal with people who you don't know. You have to kind of expand it. 20 people is a little too few, for you to really get some good information. And again, you would include your target market. And these are the people most likely to purchase your products or services. And it identifies who you're going to direct your promotional activities towards. Because usually, especially with small businesses, your promotional budget might be kind of limited. So instead of trying to promote to 7.9 billion people, Well, actually, I think it's 8 billion people in the world. Instead of trying to sell or set your promotional strategies to all 8 billion people in the world, why not kind of narrow it down to your target market? And that's basically what it is. It doesn't mean that these are the only people you're going to sell to, but these are the people who you're going to focus on. You're going to focus on these people. Some people have a little challenge understanding that aspect of it. Competition, this is very important. Competition, because this determines, the market. Is there already competition in the market? Because if there's already competition, that means you're going to have to do one of several things. Either you're going to have to take some share away from your existing competition, or if the market is so wide and so broad, you could survive only on receiving a small market share. So all of these things are important. One of the keys to analyzing competition, you always look for substitutes. For example, let's say you're going to start an airline between St. Thomas and St. John. And actually, one of my clients was thinking of that. It's easy to say I don't have any competition because right now we don't have an airline that functions between St. Thomas and St. John, but there's a substitute. And the substitute is the ferry. So an airplane is an airplane and a ferry is a ferry. So they're not exactly the same, but they're substitutes, okay, for each other. Instead of taking your plane, they can take the ferry. Because the price he was planning to charge compared to the ferry, I think a lot of people will say, well, we're going to stick with the ferry. So you have to include off-island competition, especially, with so much off-island competition, internet-based competitors, Amazon, whatever he's selling, probably Amazon already sells it, Also consider what I call a side-by-side comparison. We're going to show you an example of that in the next 2 slides. There's 7 ways to establish a competitive advantage. You could do it based on one of these several things. It would be nice to say that you're going to have the advantage in all 7 areas, but realistically, you want to choose the ones that you have the advantage in. Price, understand the difference between price and cost. Price is what you charge customers. You're selling a product for $10, but it costs you $5 either to make it or to purchase it. $10 is the price, $5 is the cost. So you can have an advantage in cost, and you don't necessarily have to have an advantage in price. For example, let's say everybody in the market is selling this product for $10, and most of them purchase it for $5. Maybe you found another source someplace, and so your cost could be $3. Everybody's cost is $5, but your cost is $3. So if your cost is $3, you don't necessarily have to reduce the price. Some people do, but some people don't reduce the price because this way you get more money coming to you. If it costs you $5 and you sell it for $10, you have a $5 profit for every item that you sell. If it costs you $3 and you sell it for $10, you have a $7 profit margin. So a lot of time people might not want to reduce the price because they don't want their competitors to get wind of the fact that you have a higher margin than them. If you reduce the price, they're gonna say, well, how come Edwards could reduce the price? Let's investigate this. So that's a little business trick that we've learned over the years. And of course, you have the quality or the efficiency of your products and services. For many customers, this is very important. It's more important than the price. They'll pay for quality. The variety of your products, the convenience, the fact that you repair it. If you sell it, you repair it. That's a nice convenience. The customer service, that's a big issue. Credibility, your qualification, especially for services. What qualifies you to do this or to perform this service? So I'm going to show you guys a side-by-side comparison. So as you can see, these are the categories, the price, we have the delivery time, which can be efficiency, or it could be a benefit as well. And then we comparing ourselves to our competitors. Now, what some people do is, you see, like I have the competitors first, and then I have your business. Some people, they put the business first, and then they have the competitors, because each one of them has its own effect. I might say, well, this competitor sells it for $60. This one sells it for 65, and this one sells it for 65, but you get it for only 55. That has a special effect. Or if you do it the opposite way, we sell our products for only $55, but if you go to those other people, they sell it for 60 and 65. So each way has its own. But I like to put this, when a client gives me the information, I like to put this in the middle of the plan, because it kind of breaks the monotony of the plan, because it's usually different. It's set up different, it's formatted different than the plan. So I like to put this in the middle of the plan. So if possible, I would encourage you to include a side-by-side comparison of your competitors. Then there's a next section where you have to state your goals, your strategies, and plans. With your goals, they have to be SMART, meaning they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-driven. These are some examples. This is a common goal. I want to make a lot of money. We all do. But a smart goal would be, at the end of our first operation, we plan to generate 200,000 in sales. Specific, and it's time-driven, and it's measurable, et cetera, et cetera. The SWOT analysis is also an important part of this section, your strategies and plans. This is where you state your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and threats. And you have to be honest with this assessment, because many people are reluctant to include weaknesses and threats, but it's important that you do that. The S and the W, the strengths and the weaknesses, are internal to the business, and these are things that you can control. For example, parking. You could, it could be a strength if you have adequate parking, or it could be a weakness if you have little parking. And excuse me, you should have some control over it, even though you might not own the area. You could ask the landlord, can you increase my parking? I need more parking. So you have some control over that. The opportunities and the threats, they're external, and you don't have any control over them. You have little or no control over them, such as new competition, changes in demand, weather, pandemics. You can't control these things. Then we have the marketing or the promotional plan. This is your plan for how you're going to promote your business. And it should be very specific. And some people, when I ask them, how do you plan to promote this business? They just say radio, TV, internet, social media. It should be a little more specific than that. Try to be as specific as possible. You should justify your choices and include your estimated costs. I usually encourage my clients to have a promotional plan, a promotional budget pre-opening, especially for those who are opening for the first time, new businesses. So you have a pre-opening strategy. How do you plan to promote the business before you open? And then once you open, what's going to be your ongoing monthly budget? Now, the truth be told, we know that there's some businesses you don't need to necessarily promote on a regular basis once it's open. There's certain businesses, once you do that grand opening, you don't, excuse me, have to do too much promotion. For example, supermarkets. You rarely see supermarkets promote. They might promote a sale that they have, but you rarely see the large supermarkets promoting. And they don't have to. People know that they, you could see they're right there. Okay. And these are the most common forms of promotion. You have the personal selling or the direct marketing, where you speak to somebody on a one-on-one. You have advertising, and you have sales promotion. And many people who they interchange the terms advertising and promotion, but really advertising is a form of promotion. The overall strategy to let people know about your products and services and your business is called promotion. And advertising is but one of these strategies. And of course, we have the sales promotions. So these are the personal selling, of course. The good thing about it is that you have that one-on-one with customers, because sometimes you really want to find out more about the product or service. And it's nice that you could speak to in many cases, the owner of the business, and they could tell you, well, this is, you could answer the questions one-on-one, as opposed to going to the website and trying to call them and whatever. So you have the advantage of that one-on-one interaction with people. But of course, the disadvantages is that it's going to take a long time to really promote. It's one-on-one, so you have to deal with each person on an individual basis. So it's going to take a long time and might cost a lot, especially if you use other people. They're gonna want to be compensated. Now, advertising is like throwing a broad net out there. If you look at personal selling as fishing with a rod and reel, for the most part, you're gonna catch one fish at a time. With the advertising, you're throwing a net. So you're gonna catch more people with one throw, but of course, you might catch a lot of things that you don't want to catch. I know if you throw the net, you're gonna probably catch shoes. You're gonna probably catch a lot of things that were discarded, a lot of garbage, and hopefully in between you'll catch some fish, but you'll have to discard the garbage from the fish. So there's attachment. I'm going to do a new share. I'm going to briefly go through there's this document, and this document, I'm going to make this available to you guys, the advantages and the disadvantages of different types of advertising media. I want to make this available to you guys. So I'm going to do a new share. So these are different types of media, television, radio, and they have the disadvantages and the advantages of all of these types of media. Okay, so if you want, I can share this with, I could make this available to the SBDC and they can share it with you if you want. Okay. Then we have the sales promotion. They're mostly specialty items, t-shirts and mugs and different things of that nature. So there's a debate, there's a debate as to whether or not these items, okay, well, some people are saying yes, meaning that they want the items. So I think it's better to make sure you let SBDC know that you want this item. And I could share with SBDC and they would, because I don't have your emails. So SBDC does have your email and they would be able to share it with you. So I was saying with the sales promotion, there's a debate as to how effective this is, because just because you have somebody's t-shirt, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are interested in your product or service. They just might want a free t-shirt. And this happens with politicians a lot. There's this one politician, I wouldn't call the name, who had a pencil with a double eraser. This was many years ago. And as an accounting student, I used to erase a lot. We used to use pencil a lot. Of course, we had computers then. It was the dark ages, but we still had computers then, but we mostly still used to do things paper and pencil. And so we used to erase a lot. And so I used to like that politician's double eraser. Not necessarily a fan of the politician, but I liked his double eraser. Okay. So there's a debate as to how effective sales promotion is. And sales promotion has all of these sub items such as publicity. Publicity can be very good. Like the Daily News Business Monday, you notice that on the front page, they usually highlight a business. However, with the Daily News, as with most newspapers, you can't just call them up and say, I want to do this. It has to be something what they would consider to be newsworthy. If you just open in a regular store, they may not do it because they might not consider that newsworthy. It has to be something that they consider newsworthy, but you can have a featured article on your business. Actually, one of my clients, I think more than one of my clients have had this done for them, and it generated a lot of leads for them. But like I said, it's convincing the newspaper, and you have to approach them. It's convincing the newspaper that this is something worth newsworthy. It is newsworthy. Information and analysis. I used to skip this part. I'll be very honest with you guys. I used to skip this part when I'm preparing a business plan. In some cases, I used to actually delete this section, this heading. But then after being a business consultant for some years, I realized the importance of this. This is something very important. How are you going to do your record keeping? And that's something very important for business. Record keeping is extremely important for business. Many times I roll up on a client and I ask, well, how much money you make this year? I ask them, how much sales did you make this year? How much of sales of this product did you make? And a lot of times they can't answer because they don't keep good records. Okay. So it's important. And I find a lot of my clients are not doing very good record keeping. There's some very inexpensive ways that you can do record keeping. If you don't want to necessarily buy the products such as QuickBooks, Quicken is a very good product. It does not only tracking your sales and expenses, also tracks your inventory as well. And you guys may notice, or you may not notice, but the point of sale system that you use, like most retail sellers use a scanning item, and you hear, boop. A lot of times when they beep the item, not only do they register it as a sale, but also it tracks the inventory. For example, if you have 10 of these products, and once somebody reaches the cashier and they scan it in, it automatically reduces it to 9, unless somebody already took up another one of the products. Okay. Customer tracking and competitive tracking. Those things are very, very important for business. So I definitely would encourage you guys to work on a plan for your record keeping. And I didn't even think about including it, but I have access to a very, very simple inventory tracking plan, something that I picked up from another SBDC, and I kind of modified it a little bit. I have access to it. Again, if you're interested in it, you tell SBDC, let them know you're interested in it. I didn't, if I thought about it earlier, I would have pulled it up today and included it as one of the items to share with you guys, but I didn't think of it till I saw it on the screen. But it's very simple. It's a spreadsheet, but you just type in, for example, you make a sale, you just type in how much you made or how many sales you made for the day, and it does a lot of the things for you. Very simple, and it's free. I just share it with people. A lot of my clients, a couple of them have really asked me for it, and I gave it to them, and they were very pleased with it. But I think more should. You should have some type of record-keeping system. The other section in your plan should be your management and personnel. You have to state your background as an owner, and don't be shy about it. Don't be shy. You have to state, your experience and your education and your certifications. Don't be shy about it. You list your key personnel. You don't have to list them by name, but list them by position. For example, we say we're going to have 2 cashiers. You don't have to say who the cashiers are going to be, especially for a startup business, because you may not know at that point who the cashiers are going to be. Also include, if you're going to include contract or casual employees. A lot of my farming clients, they use casual workers when it comes to clearing the land for them. They're not employees, but they hire a bunch of people to clear the land for them, and they pay them, and that's it. They're not really employees, but they just pay them to do a specific job, a casual worker. And also include your professional team, your lawyers, your accountant, your business consultant. Include your professional team. Now, products and services. In this section, what I do is I list as many products and services as possible. In the executive summary, and even in the overview or the section that's called the business plan, I would list a few products or general category of products. But in this section, I would list everything. With my farmers, I tell them to list everything you plan to grow, assuming that you get this loan. Everything. With some restaurants, I tell them to list everything. Now, of course, if you're going to open a supermarket, it might be kind of difficult to list everything. So you might just want to list the categories. We're going to be selling meats and fish and vegetables, etc. You don't have to list every single thing. And include descriptions and prices and margin, if applicable, if you can. Some of them you might not know. But the next bullet point, or the last bullet point, is very important. Your suppliers. Because there's certain industries, if you purchase your product from certain suppliers, you're going to have a high quality of inventory. And some of the people, some of the decision makers know about the best suppliers, okay? So don't underestimate the decision makers. Some of them have life outside of being a decision maker, a loan officer, etc. So sometimes they know this information. If you could get your supplies from a high level manufacturer, that could make the difference. Now, let's jump quickly into the financial part of the plan. And we have some myths and some truths. This first one is a big myth. A lot of people say, well, all you have to do is just bump up the sales. Just tell them we're going to make like $1 million a month, and the bank is going to automatically approve the loan. Really? The more realistic your projections are, the better your chances are of being approved. Telling you guys from experience. Don't think that all you have to do is put in a high number in terms of the sales and think that you're going to just get financed. Nope. Because the thinking of the bank is, this person really think that they could make this amount of money? We can't give this person this money, because they're thinking unrealistic. So be careful of that. Some people think you need to have a strong background in accounting or finance to prepare projections. Nope. One of my clients, and as far as I know, because I know her a little bit personally, as far as I know, she doesn't have any background in accounting or finance. She prepared financial projections in 2 days, and they looked pretty good. I had to make some adjustments, but what she had was pretty accurate. I had a client who did, he did it. This was what you call a Renaissance man. He's like, he knows a little bit of everything. I was shocked at what he did with my template. I was like, what? Yeah, so you don't necessarily, and he said this is the first time he's working on something like this. It was just that like I said, he's a Renaissance man. So you don't necessarily need to have a strong background in accounting or finance. It's similar to preparing a personal budget. It's very, very similar. The math in accounting and finance is very, very easy. The actual math itself. The challenge is, where do these numbers go? How do I label these numbers? That's the challenge. But the math part of it is very, very simple. Some people say, I'm not good with numbers. I can just let the accounting people prepare these projections, and that should be okay. I always remind people that this is your business. It's not the accountant's business, it's your business. And so you need to know about your numbers, right? One of my clients, again, when I was working at SBDC, the business used to pull in like close to more than 800,000 a year. So they're making good money. But the accountant, I don't know what they did, but whatever they did, he wound up owing like 300,000 in taxes. And he's cussing the accountant. I say, well, yeah, I understand, that's what you're paying them for. But remember, this is your business. You need to know about these numbers. You may not be able to provide accounting services for people outside of your business, but for your business, you need to know your numbers. Okay? So when it comes to the financial projections, project the worst case scenario. For some people, this is like scandalous, because they always want to show large numbers, especially when it comes to sales. But I've learned over the years, project a more accurate, even project the worst case scenario. Because if your business could be profitable, even if it's slightly profitable under the worst case scenario, then it's going to go a long way. Okay. When I was working with SBDC, there was a time that they came up with this brilliant idea of having 2 monitors, one facing the client and one, of course, facing me. And so as I'm working on the financial projection, the client is seeing the numbers that I'm putting in. And so the client will be, no, that number too low. Don't put in that number, put in a higher number. And so It reached a point where I actually I turned off the monitor that was in front of the client. Of course, I didn't tell my supervisor, but they can't do me anything now. I done retire. But yeah, I usually prepare financial projection outside of the client's eyes. I don't necessarily want them to see me doing this because there's a lot of trial and error. Put in a number, it doesn't work, you put in another number. And a lot of them fall asleep when I'm in the process of preparing it. So I usually try not to prepare it in front of them. Okay? But you definitely have to include notes that explains your calculation. This is something very important. Don't just put in a number. It's easy to say, we're gonna make 20,000 a month. How do you break down that 20,000? How did you come up with that amount? Those notes are very important. Prepare for a lot of trial and error. It's great to work on. Most of these financial projection templates are spreadsheets, so you could easily put in a number. If it doesn't work, put in another number. Sometimes you have to conduct research, especially with your startup costs. Sometimes you have to do that. Please include operating cash. Some people call this term working capital. It's mistakenly called working capital, but the proper name is operating cash. I remember I attended a seminar, and it was actually conducted by somebody from St. Thomas. But he went to the States, and he's big. He used to train a lot of bankers. And so we were trying, at attendance was some people from the various banks, from Scotiabank at the time, Scotiabank, Banco Popular, etc. And we were trying to explain to him working capital. And he said, working capital? Because working capital is something very specific, and it includes items that are not cash. Okay? So operating cash is the proper term. We finally was able to convince, and they said, oh, that's operating cash. So from henceforth, I tell people it's operating cash and not working capital. Okay? Even some banks use the term working capital, but they don't know. Okay? If you're pursuing a loan, you need to indicate at least a 25% owner's injection. If you look at the next slide, it basically would explain it to you. And I'm going to show you the sample as well. The owner's injection is your investment in the business. It's not the same as collateral. An injection is what you're going to contribute to the business, but it has to be related to the business. And it's not limited to cash. For example, you're starting a business, and let's say you already have some inventory. You could say that my contribution is going to include this $5,000 worth of inventory. That will be included in your investment. It's important because it demonstrates the owner's risk. And of course, you have to verify it. I remember a client of mine got in trouble for not verifying it. And it was a funny situation because I was preparing his financial projections and I realized that he was coming up short. He didn't have the 25%. So I told him, I said, guy, listen, before we submit this package, you have to make sure you have 25%. He only had like 12%. So it so happened that I was going to be going on vacation the next week. And so I told him, I said, please do not submit this package unless you have the 25%. So what he did is he put that he had the 25% and he went into the bank and the bank asked him a simple question. Okay, you say you have 25%, verify it. And he couldn't prove it. And the man went into the bank and he started cussing people. So when I come off a vacation, my supervisor called me into the office. He said, Edwards, one of your clients went into the bank and, was very belligerent. And I was like, I know who it was already, because I know him before. And he's a very, in our colloquial, he's a very ignorant dude. Okay, so I know he's very capable of making a lot of noise. But again, make sure you verify whatever you say you're going to contribute, you have to be able to verify it. Simple. And we're going to show you an example. Oh, after do a no share to show you the example. I'm going to show you another item that is available to you guys. It's called Daryl's Gift Shop, sample projections. So this is where This is what I want to show to you guys. So you see what I did? I added up, this is at startup, right? I'm starting a new business called Daryl's Gift Shop, right? So these are the things that I'm asking for a $50,000 loan. And this is how the money is going to be broken down. 5,000 for this, et cetera, right? Now my injection is down here. I've invested 5,000 in cash, equipment, et cetera. So my total comes up to 17.5. So when you're looking at the total cost of the project, you have to add what the bank is going to lend you or what you're seeking in terms of finance. This is the amount to be financed, $50,000 loan, and I'm putting in 17.5. So the total cost of the project is 67.5. And I'm telling the bank, look, I want to borrow 50,000 from you guys, but I'm putting in 17.5. So the total cost is 67.5. So my injection percentage, what you do is you divide your injection by the total, not by the 50, by the total. I also teach at UVI, and when I teach this to students, every semester, one of the students is going to put the 17 over the 50. No, you have to put the 17 over the 67. And that's how you get your percentage. Okay. So this is another file that I'll make available to you guys. It's a fictitious business, of course. I don't have a gift shop. And of course, I finagle the numbers to make sure that it equals at least 25%. And this is the template that I use. And you could get a blank one of these templates, fill in the number, and it's going to do the same thing for you guys. Okay. It's the same thing. Again, the operating cash, as we said before, this is money that's not obligated. If you look at my template, I had 5,000 for operating cash. This is money that's not obligated. Everything else was obligated. 15,000 for inventory, whatever amount for equipment. But this 5,000 called operating cash is not obligated to anything. It's like a savings account for the business. Okay. Now, the thing is, for the most part, you shouldn't have too much in operating cash. If most of what you're going to do with the money is use it for operating cash, is going to raise a red flag. But there are some exceptions. One exception is, for example, attorneys. Because you guys might know attorneys, what they do is they perform the work for people and then they bill them. So there's a lag time between them doing the work, billing the client, and actually getting the money. So for attorneys, they might ask for a lot of working capital. I see you got me saying working capital. They might ask for a lot of operating cash. Because one time I submitted a loan package for attorney, and this bank was very strict on the operating cash. But they understood. They say, okay, Edwards, this is an attorney, so we know how they operate. And so the loan was approved. So, but typically it's no more than 10 to 20% of the total startup or the financing costs. You notice my operating cash was 5,000, which is exactly 10% of the 50,000. And usually you base this operating cash on something that's fixed. For example, the 5,000 is gonna be 2 months rent or 2 months salary or et cetera, et cetera. That's what you usually use to base the operating cash. The cash flow statement. It should be done, I prefer this to be done on a monthly basis. The reason why is because it should factor in the repayment of the loan if you're going for a loan or other debt. A lot of our debt is due monthly. You know, your electricity bills and utility bills, they usually due on a monthly basis. So I prefer to have this on a monthly as opposed to annual basis. When I'm preparing a cash flow statement, I usually prepare the expenses first, and then I go back and put in the sales. So I find out how much sales is needed to cover the expenses. That's my strategy. You don't necessarily have to use it. That's my strategy. But of course, you should account for seasonality. That's why it's preferred to be done on a monthly basis, because you could see the seasonality. Instead of having the same amount, especially in sales, for the January, February, everything is the same amount. You might say, okay, this business is a tourism-based business. So the season, and every time I have a client, I ask them when the season starts and ends, and each one of them give me a different range. Some of them would say it starts in October, some say it starts in November, some say it starts in December. But in those months, that's a peak season, you would have higher sales than the normal months. Okay? If you have an existing business, you have an advantage. You have historical figures. But if you have an existing business, you also have a disadvantage, which are the historical figures, because if your figures are, let's say, 5,000 a month in sales, and then you want to jump it to 15,000 a month, they're going to say, well, you're making 5. How come all of a sudden you jump into 15? And you might have a good reason to jump it to 15, but it's kind of like a disadvantage because they're going to go by what you're making now. So let's go back to my sample. We're going back to Daryl's gift shop, and we're going to show you cash flow year 1. And this is, I use what they call the direct cash flow method. There's another method that other templates would use. The figures should basically be the same. So notice I have inventory, etc., etc. And again, like I said, I could make this available to you guys if you want. You even have the income tax payments, even though my LLC and the LLC isn't taxed. I have $350 for electricity. I think that's pretty, I know some businesses will say, sure, only $350. Okay, so that is that. Now, the ways to calculate sales or revenues, you could simply plug in a figure. It's the least recommended way of doing it. You should really not just do that. You could use a percentage of your target market. For example, if you say based on the census, there are 10,000 people in my target market, and I'm going to capture like 1% of them. I've actually used that method. You could use the smallest time segment, which is usually a day, and you could say how much money could you make in a day, and then you could build it up to a month and a year, etc. You could use the competitors' data. That's if that's available. Usually that's not available. Or you could use a percentage of your capacity. For example, your capacity would be your limit. For example, if you have a hotel and you have 100 rooms, your capacity is 100. And you could use a percentage of it. You could say, okay, instead of saying that all 100 rooms are going to be filled, we're going to go with 85. You could use a percentage of the asking price. And if time permits, we could get into some different ways to show. Now, what do you guys think? Should the owner be paid? Yes, no, maybe so. Should the owner be paid? One person put in the chat, yes. Another person put in the chat, yes. Another person say, yes, there should be a salary for the owner. Interesting. It depends on the employment status of the owner. Of course, like I said, when I was being trained to prepare business plans, my supervisor told me that if you don't put a salary for the owner, it's going to be a red flag, because they're going to ask you, well, how are you going to live? But of course, if you have other sources of income, like you have a full-time job, so to speak, then that of course, that would answer the question. Person say yes, after the business is stable. Now, the payment doesn't have to be a job market level. For example, let's say I'm a manager of a business. Let's say the salary in the job market might be 50,000, 60,000, 70,000, 80,000. You don't necessarily have to pay yourself at that rate, at least in the beginning. But just like what the person said, as a business becomes more stable, then you could raise your salary. Consider a percentage of sale. That's what I do for my business, right? Whatever amount I make, I take a percentage of it. And of course, the thinking is not taking a salary because you could dedicate that money or reinvest it back into the business. But if you pay yourself, my supervisor told me when you pay yourself, you show confidence in the business. Even if you pay yourself a little bit. In my sample, I have myself receiving $1,000 a month from the business. That's definitely not a market salary for a manager. That's only like $12,000 a year. But at least you're getting something from the business. We have the P&L, profit and loss statement. I grew up knowing it as an income statement, but now they're using profit and loss. And it reflects income and expenses. This is usually done on an annual basis, and it should reflect the sales that you took from the cash flow statement. And I'll show you an example of it. My income statement for my fictitious business. Daryl's gift shop, my projected sales is $253 for the month. The cost of sales is the cost of the items that I sold, cost of the inventory. Then you have the rent, all the way down to the bottom line. My bottom line is only $4,200. The top sales was $253. Now that I'm only keeping $4,271. I remember I was giving a presentation to some youths down at UVI, one of the youth programs. And I showed them this example, and the person was like laughing and say, "How you're only keeping 4,000." I had to call him out. I had to say, "Look, young man, for retail business, many businesses in the first 2 years, this 4,200 would be a negative number. I have a lot of clients. If they made this in the first 2 years, they would be jumping for joy, especially if they have a retail business. Many times in the first 2 years, you lose money. My strategy is I like to show a very small net income, either a very small net income or a very small loss, either one. No, let's say no more than 2,000 or 4,000, either way, either minus 2,000 or plus 2,000. That's my strategy. And believe it or not, once I started to implement that strategy, I started to get more loans approved. It's strange how that works, right? The balance sheet, I like to call the balance sheet the truth, because it tells you how you've been managing your money. You could make a lot in sales, but how are you managing that money? And it shows the assets, the liabilities, and the equity. So I'm going to show you my sample balance sheet. This is my sample balance sheet. Cash, the fixed assets or the hard assets. Then you have the liabilities, what you owe. And then the equity. And the retained earnings, you notice that's the same as the profit. It's the same as the profit from this. So that's what we call retained earnings. You put it on the balance sheet. And of course, you some general tips. You want to prepare your business plan before the business is launched. Unfortunately, most people, what they do is they start the business on their own. They get into trouble. They go to the bank, and the bank say, "You need a business plan." And then they come running to me, and "I need a business plan by next week." If you're seeking funding, the business plan should be done at least 3 months in advance. For some people, that seems like a long time, but you have to consider that the bank is going to take some time to make the decision. So when you actually need the money, you have to make sure you do this before you need the money. This last bullet point is important. No one can prepare a business plan for you. Even if you don't type the plan, you still have to provide the information. So nobody could really prepare a plan for you. You have to provide us with the information and we could work with you. Write down your ideas immediately. It's good to have knowledgeable people review your plan, such as SBDC. Be thorough. A lot of people complain about repetition. It's like I write in the same thing. Yes, sometimes repetition is needed. Think about a child. You know, when you have a child, you can't tell them something once, you have to repeat to them. So, and we have all of these things. We have some terms of how long does it take to do a plan. I'm going to open it up before we run out of time. I'm going to open it up to the questions. I know I'm only leaving 10 minutes for question. I wanted to leave more, but it didn't work that way, but we still have a little bit of time for questions. Q&A.
So at this time, if you don't wish to place your question directly in the chat, just raise your hand and then we can unmute and you can ask your question directly. I don't see any questions as yet, Mr. Edwards.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, when I don't see questions, I think one of two things. Either I did a very good job or I did a very poor job. So I don't know. Okay, Chris, Charisma.
Yes, hi, it's Charisma, that's correct.
Okay.
My question is, I know a lot of what you speak on was for like sales.
Mhm.
Now, the business I'd like to provide is a service. So it's
Okay.
kind of hard to project like, you know, how much clients I'll gain with the service that I provide. What will be some of the differences in sales or preparing a business plan in sales as opposed to a service?
Right. In accounting, what we learned is that sales really apply to products and revenues would apply to services, but it's basically the same thing, right? So in projecting services, you could do any one of the methods. Let's say, how many of this service am I going to provide on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or monthly basis? And of course, you'll have to multiply that times your price. That's one of, because I provide a service as well. So I know the challenge in projecting services. That's basically the way that you do it. How many of these services can I provide in a specific time period? Usually a day, or depending on the nature of what the service you're providing, you might do it on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis.
Okay.
I see some people have some things in the chat. First time joining, very informative. Okay.
There's a question. Is it a must or necessary for a business to have an attorney, especially just starting out?
To me, it's not necessary. It depends on, it really would depend on this. I know in the on the slide that says your team, it has, you know, who's your business counselor or who's your attorney or whatever. It may not be necessary based on the nature of your business, but you might want to consider it. Some businesses, you might want to consider them or to have them on call, meaning that if I need an attorney, I could call on you. Because to have a staff attorney, obviously, you're going to have to pay them for just sitting around until something happens. But the attorney is not necessary for every situation. Okay, so that was the question I saw there. Let me see, great job. Additional resources.
Is there a maximum or minimum loan amount the SBA will offer?
The SBA. Remember the SBA, you're not gonna get the loan through the SBA. The loan is gonna go through one of the commercial banks, the Banco Populares, Orientals, or the First Bank, or the Merchants Bank. The SBA would guarantee the loan. And the guarantee is up to a certain amount. I think it's in the millions that they would guarantee the loan. Now, of course, they have various loan programs. Various loan programs would have a cap on them. A lot of it would be dependent on how much you need and which bank you're going through. Do we have another question and answer? No, I don't. Let's see. Would you like to have additional slides or templates?
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, you'll receive an email prompting you to fill out a survey that lets us know how we're
Okay, yes. I'm gonna provide SBDC with a whole bunch of stuff. I'm gonna provide them with this presentation. I'm gonna provide them with my sample business plan, the advantages and disadvantages of different types of advertising, even the spreadsheet that you can use to track sales and inventory. I'll provide that to the SBDC as well. And then you could request which ones you want. You could say, I want everything, you know.
Yeah, so just look out for that email, fill out the survey, the necessary attachments will be included.
This person asks, will there be a course on developing or working a business plan? As I said before, I've taught 11 of those courses over the years. And I don't see anyone in any course in the horizon coming up anytime soon. But I've taught, and it's a 10-week course, and we go very much in depth. The same thing that we covered on these slides, we go very much in depth on each subject. But I don't see any one of those classes starting in the near horizon. But what you can do is you can contact the VI SBDC and one of their consultants, because basically they know this information and they can help you with your plan. Now, I'm telling you guys, it's much better when you have something to present to your consultant. As a result of this hour-and-a-half presentation, we don't expect you guys to have a perfect business plan, but if you at least have something, even if it's just your basic ideas, trust me, as a consultant for over 20 years, having just something, it makes a big difference. Okay, so to answer your question, no, I don't see any classes on the horizon, but your business consultant can provide basically the same services that you would get from the class. It'll be like you're in class working with your consultant. Let me make sure I answer that question. So, questions, comments, concerns? You have my correct, my direct number, but you could contact me through the VIS BDC as well. I don't work with them anymore, but I work with them on contract. So, any additional? So Sharika, you think we could wrap it up if there's no other?
Okay, I don't see any additional questions. So the VI SBDC has so much more in store for you as VI small businesses. You can visit our website at www.visbdc.org. Download the VI SBDC app on your mobile device from the appropriate app store. Like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google Business, and subscribe to the VI SBDC YouTube channel for new uploads of our on-demand webinars. Here's a preview of webinars that we have coming up. We are going to continue our financial literacy series. On the 12th, we have First Bank VI. They're going to be presenting on understanding personal and business credit. On the 19th, we have them back again, and they're going to be presenting on establishing and repairing credit. We have on April 24th, Merchants Commercial Bank. They're going to be presenting Small Business Accounting 101. And then to wrap up that series on the 26th, we have First Bank VI back again, covering the fundamentals of business credit. So we thank everyone for attending. We encourage you to check your email briefly right after this session and fill out the survey that lets us know how we are doing. And we'll be sure to include the attachments mentioned today. Thank you for your time and your attendance. And on behalf of the entire VISBDC network, Mr. Edwards, it's always a pleasure working with you to
Yes.
basically collaborate on initiatives like this for the public.
Yes, I really love working with the people and making these presentations. I'm looking forward to working with some of you on a one-on-one basis.
All righty, so that wraps it up. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
All right.